السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الأمين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. أما بعد. So we're doing part 2 of Al-Wakeel. Al-Wakeel, the one who regulates and takes care of the affairs of his slaves, of his servants. And we mentioned that yesterday that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He mentions tawakkul, to put your reliance upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So He'll describe Himself as the ever living who doesn't die. Tell you to put your tawakkul on Him, your reliance upon Him. And then He describes Himself ever living, doesn't die. And it makes sense. Or that He is the Lord of the East and the West, and to Him all the affairs return. Put your tawakkul on Him. Makes sense. All these things are encouraging you to put your tawakkul on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. These powerful descriptions. Also in Surah Al-Shu'ara, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى الْعَزِيزِ الرَّحِيمِ. And put your trust, your reliance upon Al-Aziz. Al-Aziz is the one who is capable of doing anything. So why wouldn't you put your trust on Al-Aziz, on someone else? But here's the important part. Al-Aziz Ar-Rahim. So why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give this description? That He is capable of everything, put your trust upon Him, but He's also merciful, Rahim. Because you might go to someone who's capable, who's powerful, and you tell him your story, and he shows you no mercy. He gave you time, he listened to your story, to your plea, but he didn't feel for you, and he sends you out. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you that He is capable of doing anything, and He's merciful. He will hear what your plea, your call. And then الَّذِي يَرَاكَ حِينَ تَقُومُ, the one who sees you when you're standing, meaning standing in prayer. وَتَقَلُّبَكَ فِي السَّاجِدِينَ, and your turnings in your sujood. Yani Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows your situation very well in your sujood. The things you're saying, the things you're thinking when you're standing. He knows your situation. He is merciful. He's capable of everything. So why wouldn't you put your tawakkul on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And there should be like some kind of test so we can see, are we of those who completely put their tawakkul on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or not? When we have a calamity, do we instantly raise our hands and rush to Allah Azza wa Jal with our dua? Or do we think of people before we think of Allah Azza wa Jal? Many people, if a calamity befalls them, first thing they think, who can help me? They think of so and so and this person and that person, even before they turn to Allah Azza wa Jal. So first thing we turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because we said at-tawakkul amalul qalb, it's an act of the heart. Your heart is attached to Allah Azza wa Jal. Then you do whatever means necessary, physically contact people, whatever it is, but your heart the whole time is attached to Allah Azza wa Jal. So that's the first thing. Do you instantly rush to Allah Azza wa Jal? And if you do, then you are someone who relies upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or has taken Him as your wakeel. The other thing, the scholars say that when someone has good tawakkul upon Allah Azza wa Jal, they never do the haram. Yani they never have to steal, they never have to lie, they never have to cheat, they don't have to change and lie on their resume, because they have full reliance and trust upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The other thing is, when someone has good tawakkul on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they never lose hope in Allah Azza wa Jal. Tawakkul gives you a kind of courage. So if you look at the story of the hijrah of the Prophet ﷺ, when you look at it in detail, the preparations were unbelievable. The preparations for the hijrah were just incredible. Every little thing was thought of very, very carefully. And the Prophet ﷺ goes to the house of Abu Bakr to let him know that it's time for the hijrah. He goes at the time of Dhahira. Any of you who lived in Africa or the Middle East, you know what this time means. Dhahira, there's not a living thing outside. It's extremely time because nobody's out. And he covers his face ﷺ on top of that. Then he enters the house of Abu Bakr and he says, take everyone out of the house. Yani, this is top secret what I'm about to tell you. Then Abu Bakr says, no, they're my family. And they're your family, and you can talk in front of them. Then he tells him the plan, and he puts Ali in his place, radiallahu anhu. And then they have their guide. So Abdullah ibn Urayqit, who was not a Muslim, but he knew the way very well. He will take them with the camels, and they're not going to go in the direction of Medina. They're going to go in the opposite direction, to Ghar Thawr, as you all know the story. But now he has to, when he drops them off, he takes the animals, and he They're going to stay in the cave for 3 days because day 1, the search is intense. 2, not as intense but still intense. 3, after the 3rd day it dies down. Then he comes back with the riding animals again, and then they start to head towards Medina. But in the meantime there are other things. What about the tracks? Who will cover their tracks? So they had Amr ibn Fuhayra, who is a freed slave of Abu Bakr, and he comes with goats and he covers the tracks. And while he's there, they drink milk. So that's 1. Then they go back. Then Asma, the daughter of Abu Bakr, she would bring the food to the cave every night. And she was the perfect choice. She was pregnant and she was in her last trimester. And how do we know that? Remember, the first male that was born, that survived in Medina, was her son, Abdullah ibn Zubayr. So who would expect a young woman in her last trimester of pregnancy to be going out this distance at night and going up the mountain to give them the food and come back? And then they need someone to bring the news. So Abdullah ibn Abi Bakr, he was a small boy, but he was very precocious. He was mentally ahead of his age. So he would be walking around Mecca, listening to people's conversations. And he was so young that they didn't bother and they spoke in front of him. And he would come at night and give them all the news. The plan was perfect. But despite all this plan, the Quraysh made it all the way to the cave. Despite all this. Remember the point we're discussing. Those who have excellent tawakkul on Allah, they never lose hope in Allah Azza wa Jal, because their heart is firm with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. After all this planning, and the Quraysh came to the mouth of the cave, and there was no spider, that's a very weak narration, and there was no pigeon that laid an egg, and all they had to do was just look down and they would see them. And that's what Abu Bakr said. He said, Ya Rasulullah, if one of them just looks down, they'll see us. If they just look down, they'll see us. And what does Prophet ﷺ tell him? He tells him, just don't, be quiet, Ya Abu Bakr. مَا ظَنُّكَ بِاثْنَيْنِ اللَّهُ ثَالِثَهُمَا. What do you think of 2 whom Allah is their 3rd? This was the answer of the Prophet ﷺ. And that's why the Quraysh made it all the way there. Testing their tawakkul and showing us true tawakkul in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the last point we'll close with, and that is when you have tawakkul on Allah Azza wa Jal, meaning, remember one more time, tawakkul is an act of the heart. Your heart relies upon Allah, but you do all the necessary work. When you have this tawakkul on Allah Azza wa Jal, you don't fear the future. What harm is out there in the future? And some people are so scared of what is out in the future, but those who have tawakkul don't have that. And we'll close with the story of a man by the name of Hatim al-Asam, rahimahullah. He's a very popular character, and even since his childhood, his stories of taqwa. So he's an older man now, and he has a lot of children, and he's extremely poor, and he wants to go out for Hajj. There was some talk about Hajj, and he just felt the longing to go to Hajj. So he brings it up to discussion with his family, and everyone is against him going because they're so poor. And if he goes out to Hajj and he has to travel days in advance and everything, they're going to remain in a worse situation. Except for a young daughter of his, she very much encouraged him to go out to Hajj. And so he went out to Hajj. And while he was at Hajj, the owner of that area was passing by their house, and he was thirsty. So he said, ask the people of this house if we can have any water. He said, whose house is this? They said, Hatim al-Asam. So they knocked and they asked if he could give them water. And he said, call your father out. He drank and he said, call your father, we'll give him salam. They said he left for Hajj. So the Amir thought to himself, no doubt if he went out for Hajj, they're probably in need of something. So he took out a pouch of gold, a small pouch of gold, coins, and he gave it to them. Because he figured their father's gone, they need it for sure. And then he says to everybody with him, all his right-hand men and his top ministers and his top generals, he tells, whoever loves me, do the same thing. What do you do in situations? The Arabs understand this very well, yes? Yeah? And the ruler says, بحبني اعمل زيي. أكيد يا باشا, right? For sure. So everybody gives gold pouch, a pouch of gold coins, silver coins, and these pouches are just raining down upon the family, one after the other, one after the other. The young girl, because now when her father left and they became poor, everyone was yelling at her. They're in a worse situation. It's because of you. You encouraged their father to go. So now they came to her and they said, you just come and see how much gold and silver is in the house. And she was in tears. And they asked her, why are you crying? She said, this is just a normal servant who knew of our situation and he did this for us. What about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who's well aware of our situation? And of course, Allah Azza wa Jalla is the one who caused all of that to begin with. So the one who has full tawakkul on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't fear the future. No way would Hatim al-Asam know that when he would leave, there will be pouches of gold and silver filling his house. Absolutely no way. But this is how the people of tawakkul are. Now, just as a point here, you will see incredible planning in the seerah. If you read and look for it carefully, unbelievable planning from the part of the Prophet ﷺ and the Muslims. And then sometimes you'll see no planning because something came upon them suddenly. And you'll see the Prophet ﷺ make up for it with a lot of dua. So you look at the preparation for the hijrah, and when they left, Prophet ﷺ is just making dhikr of Allah. And Abu Bakr is the one worried. And then the Battle of Badr, Abu Bakr is telling the Prophet ﷺ, enough of calling upon your Lord. And the Prophet ﷺ is making so much dua until his cloak drops off. So because the Prophet ﷺ didn't make all the necessary humanly possible preparations for Badr, he made up for it with dua. But the entire time the heart is attached to Allah, who is Al-Wakeel, the one who regulates and takes care of the affairs of His servant. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us of those who put our full trust upon Him. Jazakumullah khairan for your attentive listening. Sallallahu wa barak ala Muhammad wa assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.